Yo, call me a Games Cage knockoff as I will. Wait, what? Hey everyone, what up? Matt Kaiser here. Now, Sonic himself over the years has had tons of different formulas throughout each console generation, all the way up from the Sega Genesis to the current systems. However, the most recent formula would have to be the Boost formula. Already established in 2005 Sonic Rush on the Nintendo DS, though fully realized in 2008 with Sonic Unleashed for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. And I guess PS2 and Wii. However, the Boost formula itself has been a staple for majority of the recent Sonic games, nowadays with some slight variations in each entry. But the question is, which 3D Sonic game implemented the Boost mechanic the best, and which one didn't? So I thought, why not do a ranking video on all the 3D Boost Sonic games, from worst to best. But before beginning, if you like what you're seeing here, then by all means, like the video, click the subscribe button if you're new, and hit that notification icon if you want more Sonic content from yours truly. With that said, let's get back to the video. Now quickly, I want to give some ground rules of course when it comes to this ranking. One, that it will be only just the full-on 3D big modern Sonic games are on consoles. So things like the Rush Trilogy or the 3DS versions of both colors and generations won't be making on the list, among also Sonic Dream Team. I mean, I'm sorry, but until that game comes onto consoles, I won't count it as much. 2. The Boost formula itself has to at least take up a good chunk of the overall gameplay. Even half of it is eligible. So sadly, the special stages and Sonic Heroes will not be making this list. Not that it'll make up a difference anyway, I mean, good lord with those super ass controls. And 3, I'll be judging it into various criterias, from things like how the boost is, how it feels, how good the controls are, and how the level design overall complements it. And I think it'll be very interesting. And lastly, of course, this is all subjective and based on my opinion. So if you have your own ranking of these games, let me know down in the comments. I would love to see what you guys think. Anyway, I think that's enough rambling, so gotta go fast and get straight to the ranking. Coming at the bottom of the list, to absolutely no one's surprise, is Sonic Forces. And it's not that surprising, given that game has a whole myriad of issues that's worth discussing in an eventual re-review of this game. Totally not shameless plugging aside. However, as a Boost game, it's easily the worst one. The controls for this game is really stiff, and the overall platforming is just floaty and awkward. The Boost itself barely feels any impressive than say Generations, and the only time you had a very cool Boost moment would have to be during one of the late stages in the game where you're air boosting through, which feels like one powerful speedrunning tactic. But really, that's just the exception. The level design itself is very linear, with barely anything interesting to note, and having little to no alternate pathways. And even if they do have alternate pathways, it's all ruined thanks to the very heavy automation, and they just don't add anything cool or encouraging to discover. Not helped that these levels are so damn short, so they don't leave much of an impression. The drifting itself is also gone, not helped that even the bosses themselves that cater to this style of gameplay can even salvage it. Infinite is a pushover, both in his first and last encounter, and the giant Metal Sonic boss is just all spectacle with no substance. So much so that the final Infinite fight is basically one big copy of it. And we can't forget the final phase of the final boss, which is another repeat of the final boss from Sonic Colors.
Just enough of the damn repeats already, Sonic Team!
And to really cap on how bad this really is, we of course even have the tag team sections, where you can play as both your OC and Sonic at the same time. It's clearly trying to emulate that same style of gameplay that Heroes had, but it's even worse, with the controls being both stiff and janky, like the platforming sections in Arsenal period. But worse and worse would have to be the double boost mechanic, which is a special boost mechanic you have to activate by doing this quick time event here, and you get to plow through enemies and bosses. But it's all hampered down given the fact that not pressing the QTE in time has no consequence. And fun fact, this is all completely automated anyway, meaning you can literally let go of the controller and the game will play itself. So what's the point of all of this? And also we have the Shell DLC, and that's whatever. It exists. I mean, it's slightly better than the base game, but that's not saying much. This really is the low point of the boost formula, and if it weren't for the next two games that came after this, there's a chance that Forces would have killed it off for good. So I think it's time to move on to the next picks. I'll say this right now, it's a huge leap in quality compared to this. Moving on, we have is Sonic Colors, which in many ways is leaps and bounds better than Forces. Though, as on its own, especially as a boost game, I think it's decent. Now when it comes to the controls and boosting, it's fairly solid, and the overall platforming and level design is really good, with lots of varied locales here, as well as solid alternate pathways. Even if it does get dragged down, given the fact that you have to play through 6 acts of these levels. Colors are also traded on having this thing where instead of getting boosts from collecting rings, you get them from the wisps, as well as this brand new encourage system. And also, new to the remaster, a perfect homing attack. Even if it does grate your ears every time you hear that sound. Now, there are cool moments when you get to the boosting, during Terminal Velocity, as well as doing Starlight Carnival, and the overall general boosting levels of both Sweet Mountain and Tropical Resort. The only issue I find, however, is that this game favors more of the 2D platforming than the boost itself, which makes some of the overall boosting segments feel limited. And sure, the platforming is good, but some of it, especially when you evolve the wisps, does kill a little bit of the momentum here, most notably with the Cube Wisp. The bosses that do favor this, that being mostly these two bosses here from both Asteroid Coaster and Starlight Carnival, as well as the final boss, do complement and test Sonic's speed. Though, there's not much else to say as Colors as a boosting game. It may not be in the same level as say Unleashed or Generations, but for what it is, it's very fun and decent. Coming at the midpoint and the one that has the bronze medal, we have is Sonic Frontiers. Now this game was actually tough to rank, as in a sense, it's a more different style of game compared to everything else on the list. Though, it still has boost elements, and given the fact that Frontiers goes for a more open zone approach. And overall, I think this is still a pretty good entry. Sonic here controls very well, especially during the open zone environments. Boosting here feels very fast, and very good even. However, I'm not entirely into the stamina recharge mechanic, though obviously you can cheese to get an infinite boost, and he feels a lot more faster than say Forces. The islands here, especially in Kronos, Ares, and Uranos, do complement this test of speed, especially when you have various puzzles, whether it's things like rail grinding, the light panels, and climbing through towers in Raya Island. It overall makes a very fun sandbox to boost and speed through the islands. On top of now the brand new updates, where you can now incorporate momentum thanks to both the drop dash and now the spin dash, which really feels good. It's actually refreshing to see good old momentum back in a Sonic game, which is absolutely refreshing. The platforming here is fairly solid, and some of the mini bosses like say the Squid, the Fortress, the Strider, as well as this segment of the Wyvern Titan boss here, do complement well with the boost and reflex speed. However, the only things that do hold this game back a bit would have to be the very intrusion of 2D stuff here, most notably in Chaos Island, where it forces you to play through certain 2D segments, and the cyberspace levels, where the controls in that one feel a downgrade compared to the open zone controls, as the turning just feels so damn stiff, as well as boosting through 2D sections doesn't feel as good as it was before. And hell, you can't even boost towards enemies anymore, which is a damn shame. At least a good chunk of them do have interesting pathways, but I think the times that the cyberspace levels were actually good was when the times when they incorporated the stage design from Sonic Adventure 2, and those actually suit his physics well, as well as also the Final Horizon, being the last update we got for this game, has some really good cyberspace levels. Overall, this is pretty much a different beast compared to other games, but I think Sonic Frontiers, for what it is still a very solid boost game and a very good one at that. Reaching at the silver medal, no pun intended by the way, we have is Sonic Generations, let alone Sonic X Shadow Generations. Now pretty much this is what many consider to be the peak of the boost formula, returning back to the more unleashed style of gameplay with a mix of colors in the mix, and overall makes a very perfect balance between the two, and in some ways has some really fine-tuned aspects, with probably having the best drifting in the entire series, as well as the homing attack not being mapped to the boost button. Speaking of, the boost speed itself feels good as Unleashed, among also having some really fantastic level design. At least they are complemented with Sonic's boost style of gameplay, as they are recreated to tailor that style of gameplay with things like having tons of branching pathways, and just a good amount of 2D sections that don't feel as shoehorned in compared to like say Forces. There's even some really amazing set pieces here, like the gun truck, the giant robofish, as well as some very good roster of bosses that do complement his speed, whether it's the bosses like Perfect Chaos, Silver the Hedgehog, and the Egg Dragoon. And while the controls do feel a little bit stiff, that's more of a nitpick than anything, though things like say the final level of Planet Wisp do absolutely hurt a little bit, but still, this game is an amazing boost game, and I think this is further elevated, especially when you come across Shadow's campaign, where his levels, controls, and gameplay are on par with base generations. Heck, maybe even better. I think it's arguably the best new boost formula gameplay we had since, well, base generations. However, as amazing and great as Sonic Generations is, there is still one more game to list down, and I think you guys know what it is. And finally, coming at the number one spot, and what I think is the best boost game in my mind, would have to be Sonic Unleashed, as this was the first game to really do it, and man, what experience. Immediately, this game is what I felt like when you're going truly at supersonic speed. The boost itself, as well as the sense of speed, is truly incredible. The level design is really tight, and a lot of them are very challenging, and these are aspects where you really have to pay attention. And while yes, some can be a bit unforgiving, there are others like say Rooftop Run, which is a massive highlight for the game, and overall gives you the thrills of Sonic, which is honestly the best feeling that a Sonic game should have. And sure, it does get jam-packed with QTEs, some that can be really harsh, and things like say Eggman Land, as well as some of the pitfalls, and the really bad frame rate, especially during Jungle Joyride, especially if you play this game on original hardware, do drag it down. But at the end of the day, Unleashed itself has the best sense of both thrilling and challenge, especially with the ranking system. And as much as I do love Generations, the ranking system in that game felt a way bit too easy and lenient. Even the boss fights, while there's not much to test the speed, as there are more werehog bosses than that one, things like say the Egg Devil Ray and the Egg Lancer do test your reflex skills and knowing when to attack at the right time. I do think at that aspect Generations does have some of the better bosses, but overall, when it comes to a game that I think handles the boost the best, my mind will go immediately to Unleashed. The level design, the alternate pathways, and not the fact that this game has more DLC levels than base Generations that really test your skills, overall makes a solid plus in my book, and in my opinion, this is where we have peak Boost Sonic formula. But that is my opinion, and I'd love to know what your guys' opinions are. What do you think is the best Sonic Boost game in your mind? I'd love to know. So, until then, Mad Kaiser, out.